For the past few years, Hollywood has released horror film after horror film. Some have said we're in a bit of a horror renaissance with films like X, Megan, Pearl, Barbarian, Longlegs, Abigail, Speak No Evil, The Black Phone, and the Terrifier series. These are not all based on classic monsters, though. But classic monsters are starting to make a comeback slowly. And that started with The Invisible Man. And while The Invisible Man delivered and is named after a classic monster, some of these new classic monster films are like they were ordered off a wish. Join me as I review Nosferatu, Wolfman, and Frank Grillo's Werewolves, and some other classic monster type movies, and discuss what is going right with modern monster films compared to slasher films and other films, and what's going terribly wrong. I'm the man-child of the macabre, Bryan Peters, and you've encountered something gravely amusing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gravely Amusing, the only horror podcast that never thought he would see Dr. Robotnik become a vampire and the Jack Link's Bigfoot be considered a werewolf, all in the same year. This is Gravely Amusing, and tonight's talk is on werewolves, vampires, and just classic monsters in today's Hollywood. And tonight we have Tyler, because I can't get rid of him. He comes cheap. He's like the fries that you get with a burger, but they're not salted. You know, they're just there and you're hungry. Wow. And the wonderful Bride of Patrick, the woman, the bride in Creature Commandos is fully based on
it's hardcore.
Junia Patrick.
I'll take that. I think I'll take that. Hi.
Hey, Junia.
Thanks for letting me be a part of things.
There's no one I would want on this podcast other than you and your husband. But more so you.
I was about to say, he's the fries without salt. So
the fries without salt.
Yeah.
and you're just too hungry to try to get replacement.
And I got Creature Commando, bride. So
which was my favorite character.
This is his favorite character.
That's funny.
I watched it again as one big movie, like right after we talked about it the last time. Right after we did the review podcast. I watched all as one big movie, and it works better.
I bet it would. So
the pacing's still off, but it works better. And Creature Commandos is just part of Hollywood slowly bringing back classic monsters again, slowly trying to give it a try again. And you have these people that love classic monsters like we do. I mean, my whole first season of Gravely Amusing was all on classic monsters. And Tyler was, a big part of some of those episodes, especially the werewolf and the Wolfman episode. But Junia joined us. There we go. Tongue twister. Junia joined us for our Dracula episode. Junia is a huge fan of Dracula and vampires. And we just need her in more episodes because we need the female perspective and what a female perspective Junia brings.
Aww,
so we love Junia. Yeah, Junia.
Yay! Thank you.
That's why I married her.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for reminding me sometimes, Bri. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. So in season 1, we talked about Dracula and we talked about what it takes to kind of be a good Dracula and kind of what worked and what not. And recently, the three of us saw Nosferatu.
Yeah.
And we're going to get your thoughts on that in just a second. But Tyler and I, and unfortunately you didn't join us for that one, but Tyler and I just last night, or 2 nights ago, or the time of this recording, it was 2 days ago, we saw Wolfman.
man.
If you can even
Woof.
call it that.
That's why you
No.
gotta say is woof. Hold it, man.
See, and you said unfortunately, and in the back of my mind, I was like, fortunately for me.
Touche.
Continue.
You got me there.
Sorry.
like I don't know. I was talking to Tyler yesterday. I was like, I guess we can just call it, Buzz, your girlfriend. Woof, man.
When I came home, I was telling Junia about it. She just looks at me and goes, "Why didn't they just call it Face of the Wolf?" And I'm like,
Right.
if they would have
Right.
just said that, I think I would appreciate the movie. And I just watched actually two very crappy werewolf movies that one of them had at least a little parts that were better-ish. So,
What movies did you watch?
Operation Blood Hunt with Jonathan Rhys Meyers was total garbage. And The Beast Within, which was the one I told you about that had the twist that was just kind of like either they ran out of money or they were like, hey, we can be crafty at the end.
So you're already fueled for this discussion. So the name of this episode is Hollywood just ordering their monsters off a Wish?
Good title. Good title.
Because we keep getting monster movies that just aren't delivering. And it's hard to mess up monster movies like Godzilla and kaiju type stuff. It's hard to mess them up. You can, but it's hard to.
Right.
But it seems just lately that Hollywood is and when I talk about these monsters tonight, I mean the classic monsters. I mean like Dracula and vampires in general, the Wolfman and werewolves in general, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Invisible Man things. Those type of classic universal type monsters, they're just having a hell of a time getting them right.
Right.
And getting these big movies that are just delivering and making lots of money and people are just falling in love again. One of the big things that's bugging me and bugging a lot of fans and of course Tyler is that the MCU, the Hollywood juggernaut, that's kind of, well, maybe not anymore, but the Hollywood juggernaut of the MCU cannot figure out how to make a dang Blade movie. And Blade to us is as simple as making a PB&J sandwich. I mean, you have a badass black guy, and you have a bunch of weapons,
Yep.
and you have him just kill vampires. Like the way Hollywood doesn't even really care about writing scripts anymore. So why is this even difficult? Like,
You think of what I'm thinking?
I think so. I think we're thinking the same thing. We're watching. Yeah. Okay. You say it.
So, you know how there's been talk about Mahershala Ali, like if he's going to have to recast because of all the time it took from when he was announced to now, right?
how they've wasted years of his life because he was under contract for this movie that never happened?
Yes.
Yes.
So, Junia and I have been watching Cross on Prime with Aldous Hodge, and I really have always liked him. He more recently played Hawkman in Black Adam, okay? Now, I've heard, not a rumor, but from fan speculation, that they want him to play an aged up T'Challa, but I think he'd be badass as Blade.
I think he'd be great as Blade. Yeah.
He would be great as Blade.
Yep.
Absolutely, he would.
He's got.
So there you go. There's how you fix it right there.
Right. He's got some of those classic, Bladeisms already as that character, and thinking about, I grew up. I mean, I think you guys did too. Watching the Blade movies and seeing Wesley Snipes just kind of like knock that out of the park.
We showed Solomon the trailers for the Blade movies yesterday.
So good.
Just because I also he could maybe watch Blade Trinity because it's so watered down and stuff. Like I think there might be like one or two parts. And I think Blade Trinity's even is it PG-13 or rated R? I almost feel like it was PG-13.
Rated R, man.
I don't remember.
They're all pretty intense.
The second one's the best, but yeah.
My whole point is I think he's got kind of like Wesley Snipes vibes without being, too close to it,
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. I think he could do very well. Hodges pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was the highlight. He was one of the highlights in Black Adam,
Yes.
Yeah,
like
for
big
sure.
time.
For sure.
So, just transitioning into this vampire talk, I want to talk about vampires first.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, at the time of this recording, and I want to start with Junia because ladies first, as
Okay.
we go
Makes
around the room asking these questions and
Okay.
debating stuff. At the time of this recording, Junia, what is your favorite vampire film?
Such a hard question to answer.
Well, I like to go in fast and hard right from the beginning.
Because I'm a huge fan of, Bela Lugosi, however you want to say it. The simplistic classic Dracula movie that is provided for us back then. But this might be one that's completely off the wall. I absolutely fell in love with Queen of the Damned back in the day.
Ooh,
So,
man, that's one I
yeah.
haven't seen in a long time.
So that might be one of my favorites for nostalgia purposes, if nothing else.
Good choice. Good choice. All right, Tyler.
I honestly don't know how to answer this question. I sat and thought about it, and it might be, and this might be my answer, but it might be Underworld: Rise of the Lycans. I don't know at the
It's a
moment,
good one. It's a
because
good one.
for the vampires, like there's elements of so many different ones that I like, but when you pose this as a potential question for our discussion, I got thinking about it and I'm not sure. So I'm going to go with that for now because I really don't know. Because you and I have spent a lot of time talking about Dracula and our favorite versions of Dracula. And I've had that in my mind, and I'm making a couple of notes here as we're talking. I'm not sure, honestly. So I'm going to go with that for right now.
See, I picked Queen of the Damned just because, if you don't mind me butting in here real quick,
No. The less I talk, the better for the listeners.
I can't, whatever. Is it Aaliyah? Is that her name that played the
Mhm.
queen? There's something about the depiction of her as that character that just brings in like that cold chill down your spine that you want to feel from like a vampire presence. Otherwise, like there's been other iterations where I feel like you see more gore and we run into like, something being unnerving because there's a lot of blood, like a character being unnerving because there's a lot of blood. But like with her, she had a presence about her that really spoke to the elegance of a
Yes.
vampire, but
Yes.
also spoke to the horror of the vampire too, and the strength and the allure at the same time. So I don't know. I loved the way that her characterization was in particular. Might be a little bit of not so popular perspective, but yeah.
No, like when that movie came out, the one thing that everybody praised was, her performance.
Yeah.
And I don't remember a lot of the movie. I think I only saw it once, like when it came out.
Sure.
But a lot of people were saying like because they praised her performance and they said just like this woman has potential in Hollywood and all the things that they had such hope for her, and
Yeah.
unfortunately she passed away. And if you're going to leave a legacy in Hollywood, you want your performance to rock, and she did. So she left this world without leaving a crap performance. So
For sure. And I loved Stuart Townsend too.
uh-huh.
Yeah. I had a huge crush on him back in the day, but because of his characterization as Lestat. But I don't know. It was very well done, in my opinion, as far as like the acting and stuff goes. Yeah.
So Queen of the Damned.
Queen of the Damned.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Tyler, do you have an answer at all? Yeah.
No, I'm going to stick with the Underworld.
Rise of the Lycans.
Yeah.
Rise of the Lycans. My favorite vampire film. You know, I'm probably gonna have to go with. You know what? I think I'm gonna say. I think I'm gonna say because it's vampire,
Mhm.
not Dracula film, vampire film.
Right.
I'm gonna go with Blade 2
That's fair.
Yeah, I'll accept that.
That was in the back of my mind as well. I hear you. Yep.
because it's very well written and it's very fun, and sometimes you just want to watch a badass action flick with vampires.
Yeah.
Uh, so uh oh, you know what? I messed up. Okay, so at the time of this recording, which I like saying, this sounds fun because what is your favorite werewolf film? Junia.
I might throw people off again. I haven't seen this movie in a very long time. And honestly, it's just kind of like it stuck out to me. And this is a hard question to answer too, because I really love the lichens and stuff, but they're lichens. So is it werewolf? You know what I mean?
You're liking the liking.
I love the lichens in, the underworld movies and stuff, but as far as a werewolf movie goes, that's kind of sticking out to me. I really loved Blood and Chocolate.
I knew that's what you're going with.
Did you know that was what I was going to go with? Yeah.
When you said you hadn't seen it in a while.
Yeah. It's unique. It's kind of like out there a little bit.
I haven't seen it in a long time. I think the last time I saw it was before, either right as we became friends
Yeah.
or right before then.
It has a really cool, like, it actually leans into the lore of the creation of the werewolf and all of that too. And I really enjoyed, leaning into that. But it leans into the thought process even of like werewolf packs. And yeah, I don't know. It's not just like the Wolfman solo, it's werewolf packs and stuff. So anyway,
So is that the movie with Johnny Depp? Like, and he's like in France and stuff. It's like chocolat.
No, that's
like
chocolate.
turns into a werewolf. And
No, that's chocolate.
no,
Yeah,
no,
that's just chocolate.
that's just chocolate.
so okay, is it?
This
Well,
one's
okay.
like, I can't
Is it
even
the one
remember
where
the
like
actors.
where he gets drunk all the time and he's on his ship and like
No.
he goes after Keira Knightley and
No.
like gets her drunk and like has some chocolate and won't have sex?
That's
No.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, well, damn. Blood and chocolate.
Blood and chocolate.
2007.
I don't think I've seen this movie.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah,
You said
I-
Well, okay.
2007.
What about so Blood and chocolate. Okay, is it the one where where Johnny Depp's just walking on the beach all the time and like the psychiatrist shows up and says you're crazy, and then like Johnny Depp is just like banging chicks left and right, and he's like
Nope.
really young, and then he
Really?
like gives him chocolate, like sexual
And then he
chocolate.
turns into a werewolf.
he
Is
is
that
like
what it
really
is?
hung up on Johnny Depp right
He
now.
really
Yeah,
is
it's
hung
like,
up on Johnny Depp now.
It's like Don Juan Moon Marco. Maybe that's what he's called.
No one DeMarco.
I don't
Do
know.
you
I like Johnny Depp. Okay.
do you have it pulled up?
Yeah, I
Like,
just sent it to him.
you did send it to him. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember what the main actors were in the film or anything like
The
that.
only one that
Johnny
maybe
Depp.
is Hugh Dance. Might be the
Hugh
only.
Dance, yes.
That's the only one that he might be. Oh, I've
I
seen
love
him.
him. Yep.
Yeah,
Blood and chocolate. Man, that looks seductive.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like romancy vibes. I'm a chick, go figure. Like, it's something that I get into, but
My gosh, you're a woman.
I know. But yeah,
Oh
it's a
yeah, Johnny
different
Depp's in this. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So that's your favorite werewolf movie,
Yeah.
Tyler. I think we already know the answer for you.
It will be the Wolfman, and I'll accept either the original or the 2010 one.
Really, you're not gonna like pick one or the other because they're vastly different.
They are vastly different. They have a lot of same, and I love the original, the Wolfman, but there's a lot of. I like the gothic sense of the 2010 one.
Right, but you
set in the
can't like
past.
really switch one out for the other.
No, you
because
can't. They're not interchangeably by
right.
any
They're not
means.
interchangeable. That's why I'm challenging you.
I
that's all.
know. I'll take the original 1941
Okay, there we go.
just to make you happy.
No, I'm
No?
just trying to understand. That's all. You do you, man. I was just asking. No, we're not married.
I would say, yeah, I would say the original one, the 1941, is my favorite werewolf film as well. Because I'm old and classic. All right.
Love it.
What do you think is the worst vampire movie?
All right. Now, wait. All I'm going to say is this. Do we have, like, worst vampire movie made by a studio trying to make something good? Because let's be honest, there's a lot of direct to streaming / back in the day, direct to video that are just garbage movies in general. So is it the worst?
Just the worst
Vampire
vampire movie you've ever seen?
Did you say vampire strippers?
Yeah. I know there's one named something like that, or because Garrett found it at Blockbuster. I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But no, seriously, what you get to pick.
And then give me your worst werewolf film, because that's the next question.
Okay.
Your worst vampire and your worst werewolf film.
No, this is hard. This is really hard. I'm really not sure what to pick for my werewolf one, to be honest with you, because I didn't go see that movie with you guys. Sorry, that was crappy.
Yeah. We love you, Junia.
Cool. As far as the worst vampire movie goes, and I'm going to probably get some hate for it, is the Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman. Hate it.
Oh!
Hate it.
Junia!
I hate it.
Junia! You went for the jugular.
I did. And you know, it's...
People
I
love that film.
I know. That's why I'm saying I'm going to get hate for it. But I hate it not because of the actors. The actors are absolutely wonderful actors. There is something really wrong with the directing, the pacing, the story. I could go on and on, but it does not speak Dracula to me. So it's kind of a lie in my book. Werewolf wise, gosh, I'm not sure. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I don't like. Werewolf wise. Genuinely.
Okay.
Everything that I've seen, I've enjoyed. How's that as far as werewolves go?
And just for the listeners, Blood and Chocolate is on Tubi.
There you go.
Blood and Chocolate, Tubi.
Yeah.
2007. Johnny Depp is not in it.
Johnny Depp is not in it. No.
So take that to the bank.
Might be easy, but to me, it's really cool.
All right.
Tyler,
Mr.
Seriously.
Complicated.
Mr. Complicated.
He called your ticket, man.
Okay. My answer would...
For which one? Vampire or werewolf?
For vampire... All right, I'm going to say this one because I was highly disappointed. The newest Salem slot.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was very... Because we're talking about some of the, like, I'm sitting here making notes of more recent things. I was highly disappointed in that film. So I'm going to go right now and say the most recent Max original Salem slot for vampire, because I was very disappointed in that. For werewolf, I would say Woof Man, but we'll talk about it as we break it down. I'm going to say an American Werewolf in Paris.
See, I haven't really seen any of those. So
I watched that one because I like Tom Everett Scott, and it just has that 90s, like, kind of MTV won it, and the werewolves look more like the demon dogs from Ghostbusters. And I just feel like it could have been better. And it kind of was a letdown, and it's one of those that people just kind of forget it even exist.
I mean, we're forgetting too, guys, that we can pick Twilight as an option for both of these.
Damn it! He took away my freaking joke.
Sorry.
You took it away from me.
I do that to Tyler all the time.
You took my balls. You took my balls, and you took my joke for my damn podcast, and you just cut my balls off.
Sorry, Bryan.
You neutered me. Because I was going to say, what's my worst vampire movie? Twilight. What's my worst werewolf movie? Twilight.
Congratulations.
There we go. We got
There we
Bryan's
go.
answers.
Damn
Makes sense.
But I was going to present it in a very funny way.
And I just took it. Sorry, man.
Gotta be quick with her. She's from Erie, PA.
Erie, PA?
See, and now you're not going to invite
From
me
Erie?
to any podcast.
No, it's me making a That Thing You Do reference, which is back to the American Werewolf in Paris reference, because Yeah.
This guy
Yep.
complicates everything. All right. Now into the meat
Okay.
of the vampire talk. All right. Junia.
Yep.
First question in our vampire talk part of this discussion today. Have they ever got, well, this is to Tyler and you, double question, have they ever got Dracula right?
The character or the story?
Ooh, that's a really good point.
Why do you have to throw another question onto
Because I'm a
my
dick.
question?
That's what Tyler does all the time. He answers a question with a question. Believe me, it's maddening.
Okay.
Listen. If I wanted to be that girl in the bookstore at 4-Year-Old Virgin, I just would. Do you
Andy.
do you like to go there? Are we going there?
Okay,
Would you like
I'll
to
go.
go there?
I'll go first, real quick, on this.
Oh, okay.
Just
Go
and
ahead.
I'll leave my piece.
Have they ever got a Dracula movie right?
The reason why I give some props to Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula is because it's like the only version that actually tried to do the suitors for Lucy, where they did Quincy and the other guy I always forget and Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
So I give him props there. And I think what's sad is I've watched videos where people break down that is the closest to the book when you start pairing stuff up.
Homewood.
Yes, Homewood, Arthur Homewood. Thank you.
Arthur.
So I give him props for that. Okay. SARS, but I hate Dracula with a love story. And I know that's going to come up more. I hate that that's what that movie is like this romantic. No. And I hate that that's been carried on. Now, the character of Dracula, I still stand beside this. The best version of the character of Dracula is Klaus Bang from the BBC Netflix series.
Oh, okay.
Because he makes me feel unnerved at times.
Right.
Now,
correct.
He's very good at that.
His story, the way they reinterpret it and stuff, but his Dracula is the best.
I agree. I wish there were some differences for that specific show, but he is extremely unnerving and makes you uncomfortable and makes you feel like there's somebody who's standing right behind you in the room as you're watching the show, which I love. And part of that's the directing of the show as well. The directing was done pretty well, in my opinion.
And that's Steve Moffat. He knows how to write. He's one of my favorite TV British writers. He wrote Sherlock, Doctor Who, seasons 6 through 10. The man knows how to write.
Yeah. It could have been closer to the, actual storyline of Dracula. And I think that would have, pleased us more as, fans of the story and whatnot. But I agree with you, Tyler, to be honest. Might be the only time I really fully agree with you.
Woohoo!
I'm just picking.
She agrees more with me.
Sometimes, yes. But yeah, I would have to say that we have seen a very good interpretation of the actual character of Dracula and Klaus, but as far as a storyline goes, we're missing it. And it does go back to the romance aspect of things, because I feel like somewhere along the line in Hollywood, they decided in order to sell a story that it had to have some kind of romantic element in it. And that's what we've kind of assigned ourselves to, especially when it comes to Dracula for whatever reason. So
I think that Dracula's been done right in terms of Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
Of course. And, the season finale is season 1. Tyler and I talked about what we feel the definitive versions of some of these characters are. And my answer was Claus in terms of Dracula. He sold it so much, but his interaction with the nun at the church, and this show can be found on Netflix, everybody, just under Dracula and BBC Dracula. That scene was so good, but the scene that happened before that sold me even more was when John Harker is on the roof of the castle and he's just kind of laying there, and he's kind of suffering a little bit, and Dracula just lays next to him in the shadow, make sure he's not in the sun, and it just talks to him and taunts him about everything that's going on and how he's been feeding on him. And it's just wonderful villain manipulation and dialogue. It's just so good. Dracula needs to make you uncomfortable.
Mhm.
But he needs to also be able to be suave when he's out in public, when he's hiding what he really is.
Right.
And needs to be able to be suave and charismatic and manipulate, but it's not for the ways of romance, it's for power, it's for control, you know. And just my opinion there. So moving on to classic Dracula type thinking here, when Tyler and I and Eugenia went to see Nosferatu, we were talking with Abraham, who manages the theater in town, and Abraham said that he never saw Bela Lugosi's Dracula. And the more that I talk to those kind of under 30, the more I hear that they've never seen Bela Lugosi's Dracula, and some of them never even seen Christopher Lee's Dracula. And with so many people today and so many youths and not seeing classic Dracula, do we even need Dracula in Hollywood anymore? Or is Dracula's time past? Yeah, I asked the hard questions tonight.
So, can I butt in?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, we don't need necessarily any of these characters but I would say that
I
it's
need Dracula.
definitely I would say that it's definitely something that needs to be fulfilled at some point in time. Because I don't feel like we've ever really truly felt fulfilled with the story. Just as an audience in general, even if, you have people who have just watched, for instance, the Gary Oldman version, like there always feels like, or always sounds like with everybody, that there's something missing. So, and we can't please everybody, obviously. Hollywood can't please everybody. But I would definitely say, because Dracula is such a classic story and there's so much history and there's so much lore, and Dracula was basically like, the foundation for all of these other amazing stories and movies and, series that we watch today, that absolutely it should have its, I don't know, its apex, its pinnacle moment here today, it deserves it.
Absolutely.
I
Just from a historical aspect, from just the birth of horror, Dracula needs to be around.
Yeah.
I agree with everything she said, and I will just add this, that if you remember that Dracula stems from literature and is first and foremost a literary classic book
Yeah.
that's held to a high esteem,
Yeah.
that gives cred to horror as fiction and a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you have a question later that's going to pull back to this of, I think Dracula always has its place, and I will piggyback more on this with a later question about referencing back to Abraham and about having not experienced those classics. So I'll hold my comment for a moment.
I'll allow it. So vampire movies, they're very popular in today's eyes. Most people might say they haven't seen, classic Bela Lugosi Dracula or Christopher Lee, but they'd say that they saw Francis Ford Coppola's, Bram Stoker's Dracula. They say they've seen that, and a lot of people say, oh, that's wonderful. That's Dracula. It's awesome. We're old, so we think different. But one vampire type movie that a lot of people agree on is The Lost Boys,
Yeah.
and how good The Lost Boys is. So, in you guys' opinion, what made Lost Boys work, and why does Lost Boys still hold up today?
I think it's relatable to people. I think, when it came out, it was something that they could, see themselves being a part of. whereas when you have something like a Dracula story, it's back in the day, and so it's removed from your audience. But The Lost Boys was something that I feel like, felt like it's gonna sound twisted, but like, kind of power to the youth kind of a vibe, so less of a scary thing, more of an empowerment thing, if that makes any sense.
No, it sure does.
And I'll add this.
Yeah.
Think of a vampire, because Lost Boys, okay, even Salem's Lot, Stephen King's is Salem's Lot's kind of Stephen King's Dracula.
Right.
Okay. So every vampire type stemmed from Dracula, Salem's Lot, Nosferatu, literary attitudes. The Lost Boys evolved the vampire and put
There you
it
go. He's getting
with
to what
the
I was going to say.
youth, and it stepped outside of Dracula and just focused back on vampire.
Yes.
And there's
created like a new category.
and there's probably some films we're not thinking of that are more cheesy, low budget horror.
Yeah.
But this was a slick, think of the 80s. You have Joel Schumacher as a new director, and you have produced by Richard Donner. So there's cred coming in.
Joel Schumacher directed, Batman Forever, Batman Robin, The Rock,
The Client.
And Richard Donner of Superman, the movie fame.
I've always said that the end of the 70s, like 78, 77, 78, 79, gave birth to the directors of the 80s.
Right.
So Richard Donner, all the stuff that he produced in the 80s, the Lethal Weapon was all like made the 80s, right? So you have him producing, you have a young, hip cast, you have the Coreys at like the height of the Coreys. So you have your youth invested, and it's scary, but it's also fun. I mean, you got the saxophone guy. I me's right there, Bryan's in. He just sees himself up there with the saxophone, like.
Absolutely. Bleeding Gums Murphy right there.
Yeah.
Hey, Lisa, you want to be a vampire?
But just the idea of the Frog Brothers, I think, put, people in their minds of like, oh, hunting vampires is cool. And it's, and I cannot think of something, but I think that just, I'm looking at a date real quick.
What year was it? Relatable. It made it something that was like intriguing to the public of the time.
And the vampires were young themselves.
Yeah.
Because
in my opinion, why it holds up so well is because, piggyback on kind of what you guys said, because you said kind of what I was going to say, is before Lost Boys, vampires were pretty much an old man's game. We have this gentleman, whether it be Dracula or whoever, it was a gentleman's game. It was an older fella, seducing, women and whatever. It was that thing. And then you come with the Lost Boys, and like Junia said, it's an FU to that. It's that vampires can be teenagers and they can be younger, and we can introduce, younger vampires and this rebel yell, Billy Idol part, and in the midnight hour, she cries more and more and more. And she wants more horror, and that's the Lost Boys there. And plus, you had vampires being hunted by comic book nerds, and what better thing can you have in the world of horror, of film? And Kiefer Sutherland, like, showing how good of an actor he could be.
Gosh, yeah.
I mean, that movie great, and it'll probably always hold up, in my opinion, at least, as long as I'm alive. But speaking of low budget and cheesy horror movies, why is Once Bitten with Jim Carrey the greatest vampire movie there is?
Because it has Jim Carrey.
Everything
That's
with
correct.
Jim Carrey is fantastic.
Once Bitten, one of Jim Carrey's earliest movies. It's not his earliest movie. His earliest movie is Earth Girls Are Easy, and also has Jeff Goldblum in it. But in the 80s, Jim Carrey, extremely young Jim Carrey, does do a vampire movie with kind of a female type Dracula thing, and she's looking for virgins, and Jim Carrey plays a virgin, and he gets bitten, becomes a vampire, and it's just a fun vampire movie. And I was just making a little joke, but I wanted to pitch Jim Carrey because I love Jim Carrey, and I think it was his birthday today. So
Oh, was it really?
yeah, I think it is his birthday. He just turned 53, I think,
Dang, no wonder I like the guy.
or it's sometime in this week.
Jason Segel's birthday today. What up?
Love Seagal too. See, Solomon kind of gives me Seagal vibes. That makes sense. Okay.
Solomon was born a day before Grant Gustin, so the greatest Flash that ever was.
So our son's gonna grow up to be an amazing, funny, and goofy superhero. I love it.
Jim Carrey's birthday was yesterday.
I love Jim Carrey so much.
1962, he was born. So yes, at 53,
He's awesome.
he's the best. Now for an even harder question.
Go for it.
Okay,
Nope, this one will be easy.
it's kind of a two-part question, if you will. Do you feel that Dracula has been ruined, and what do you feel ruined Dracula?
Oh, I want to get into this one. Let me in on this one.
Uh-huh.
So, I think
Tap me in, coach.
okay, Dracula and vampires were ruined.
So
And
I just said Dracula, but the next question is what ruined vampires. So just tying
it together.
We'll just join together. Yes,
Because it ties together, okay?
Okay.
And this is going to go back to Abe. This is what I was talking about earlier.
Sure.
tied together, Ty.
Abe's like what? He's 10 plus years younger than us, okay?
I would say if I were to give my best guess, I think Abe's like 25.
Okay. So what happens just like in horror, and we'll say with Freddy Krueger, why is it that you watch the early nightmare films and he's scary, but as he goes on, and it's a trend with horror, is it you introduce more comedy.
Yep.
Where your icon and your horror figure becomes comical. So let's jump back to Dracula. We start to get Dracula spoofs. We get plays off Dracula where the horror, the fear is lost to more of the comical. Even we get like, okay, Blackula, Vampire in Brooklyn, Grandpa on the Munsters. Then we, Dracula Dead and Loving It that parodied all of not only Bela Lugosi, but also Francis Ford Coppola's. You do like even Once Bitten, which is a horror comedy. You start adding those elements and you add in the romance and you water it down. And that's the issue with any, I think, horror is after a while, it becomes comical because you inject that and then you lose the scariness until you can find a way to get it back in there. And it gets harder to get it back in there. And the younger generation, they grew up with like their monsters type thing. We're like your Freddy, Jason, Michael, where to them, they're not as scary anymore, but because it was like that generation and a half removed. And that we're seeing that those horror icons are in this vein of they're not that scary anymore. Even with the more recent Halloween, like it wasn't as scary. So I think Dracula gets ruined because it gets watered down, overused, and it became so comical and used all over the place that he wasn't scary anymore. And it became more about the romance or the angle. I've always said that in Dracula stories, like if they did he really shouldn't be a protagonist.
Okay.
He should be a very secondary, almost Palpatinian character. Yes, I did make that word up. Where he's very active at the beginning with Harker, but then he works very much in the shadows. The more you know about him, I think the least fearful he becomes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But that's what I was holding off to say is once you made Dracula comical and you did your spoofs and jokes on the character, you started to lose the fearful elements.
Can I go?
Yep.
Cool. I'm just making sure it's okay for it to be my turn. No, so I don't think it's ruined. I think that there have been aspects that have definitely, tainted it over time, but nothing to me in this whole storyline characterization is irredeemable. We can do it right again, or we can do it right the first time, or however you want to look at it. Because in my opinion,
which is what we want.
It's about what we teach people. It's about what we teach people to see, right? That's what Hollywood's all about. What are we teaching people to see? Well, like, if you want to create, I mean, for real, like,
I am now sitting Indian style under the tree as you sit there on a stump and tell us your wisdom. Go ahead, Mama Junia.
I'm just saying that, like, it's something that you would have to retrain, basically. You'd have to reintroduce the character. And you could do a method where you even did it kind of like slowly over time, where you're just kind of like fading off of the things that we know Dracula to be. That way you're moving into a new generation of being able to teach them who Dracula really was. Or we can rip the Band-Aid off and just go for it. And it might not be something that all of the fans are like, on board with right away, but over time it's going to be something that people look back and really appreciate, like we do with a lot of great movies and films. I don't know why this just popped in my head, but like the whole following for like Rocky Horror Picture Show, it wasn't something that was loved right off of the bat. Like it was something that over time people, started to fall in love with as a cult classic, obviously, but it's about what you teach people. So in my mind, absolutely it's redeemable. I don't think it's ruined. I think we have a lot of good elements that are present, but now let's get away from what's been popular or what's been, oversaturated and start to strip it back down again. And if I could say this, like, I think that, not trying to get too ahead, our Nosferatu film had some elements of that, especially in the first part of the film. But yeah, I'm done.
No, absolutely. I would say, somewhat backing up what Tyler said here.
Yeah.
I would say that Dracula started his downfall like mid 60s is where it kind of started. And this is where, like, we were kind of at the height of Christopher Lee taking off in 1959 as Dracula and being terrifying and this very like demonic, animalistic Dracula. But around 64, we start getting these parody films thanks to Andy Warhol. and he does a Batman Dracula movie just randomly. And that's just a little bit. And then we get John Carradine in a 1966 American horror western where it's Billy the Kid versus Dracula. And we're throwing a parody in there just a little bit. Mad Monster Party came out in 1967 as an anime claymation, but I don't blame that for anything. It's just like so kids can get into it.
Yeah.
But as Christopher Lee is now 10 years going in Dracula, and we start entering the 70s, I would say the 70s is where it really hit in there. So 70s, especially with a British studio of Hammer doing Dracula, we started getting the 70s was a very sexualized decade. Very much free love as the 60s, well 60s big time, but kind of going into the 70s, we kind of went in there and kind of the rise of, honest to God, more pornography films, and we get this movie in where is I lost it. We get in 1979, we get a movie with George Hamilton called Love at First Bite. And we get this parody joking movie of Dracula and putting like a kind of a romantic comedy thing. And, people might want to go and say that Blackula hurt Dracula, but you're just a freaking racist. We hate you. I would say only in the terms of making a parody film. A parody film of Dracula, the more parodies you have, whatever it might be, the more it's going to water down that character. And like Tyler said, adding the more comedic factor and is just going to hurt it more. But when we go in to do a movie, Love at First Bite, and then in the same year, we get Frank Langula's Dracula, which in my opinion is the absolute worst Dracula movie. The worst. I mean, all it is Dracula going after a woman and trying to have sex with these women, not just bite them. It is pure trash, is god awful. So, in my personal opinion, when you add more parody to these vampire movies and you're making it more comedic, or you're making it more love story, whatever you're trying to do, and you're taking the horror aspect out of this, and it's not scary anymore. You add the comedy to Freddy's not scary anymore. You add the more comedy to Chucky's not scary anymore. Like, Chucky started with a little bit of comedy stuff, but like, why Child's Play was scary is like, is something going to attack my child? And I think it's like cool for them and safe for them. Like, the more you take these horror elements out, the less scary it's going to be.
Well, Negative Nancy's, can I just throw in one more thought process here?
As long as it's negative.
No, I was just going to say, a lot of these parodies and stuff that you're talking about, and Bryan, you even mentioned it earlier when you were saying that, the younger people that we talked to today, they know Bram Stoker's Dracula mainly. Like, a lot of these people don't know those parodies, right? A lot of these people don't necessarily know those 70s knockoffs and stuff like that. So, with that being said, you're in a space to be able to train the new generation, right?
But you're twisting stuff on me. Look at you.
But a lot. But I'll split.
Did you say you allow
I'll
it?
split.
You're right. You're right. They don't know those. You're right.
But the problem is, because of those parodies and stuff, like, getting newer, good versions of the characters seem to be harder. And that's why I said about the 80s
Get
is
new writers.
they don't go back to the black and whites. Like, I've heard people say, like, I won't watch this because it's in black and white. Selah has said to me she doesn't like that some of the stuff that's in black and white. And I get that. And then I have my own problems, like I said, about 70s cinema and like some of the Hammer movies, the way it's shot and the colors
He hates
and stuff like that.
He really
like,
does.
I'm not a huge fan as well. I feel the same way.
I don't, I like the late 70s, like I was saying, that where we're segueing into blockbuster. But I mean, there are good movies in the 70s, don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
But
Jaws.
well, that's what I'm saying. That's
Superman.
that's the segue into blockbuster filmmakers,
Right.
Spielberg, Donner, Lucas, before they take off. And I think
Dr. No.
you have Dracula, such a cultural conscious character because of everything. Like, how many other versions of Dracula, or he pops up in cartoons, comics, and all this. And
Totally. I mean,
it's such a, because Dracula, isn't Dracula the character? I don't know if it's Dracula. Vampires are in the public domain, basically, because they're folklore based. I don't know if Dracula is, but it is a character that comes up in a lot of stuff. Like, even low budget stuff will use, like, Dracula.
I'm pretty sure Dracula's in the public domain.
See, I think it is too. And because of that, it's a character that people like, they can sell it off name, and then, there's diminishing returns because they'll use it and it's just, they don't find the angles. There has to be a psychologicalness, I think, to make Dracula really scary, not just the physical. It's kind of like,
so I'm sorry to interrupt you. Dracula is in the public domain because I just did a freaking podcast about it with Orlock. so I don't know why my brain shut off, but yeah, Dracula's in the public domain. The whole point of the existence of Count Orlock is because it wasn't in the public domain. But yeah, she's in public domain. Dracula, anybody can use Dracula and Frankenstein. Anybody. Yes, sir. Continue.
No, you're fine. My train of thought.
I hear you, but you could do that with any character.
Right. But I'm saying, like, if I wanted to make something and sell it, like Dracula, I'm trying to get back up my set.
Sure. Sorry.
It's not just the vampire. Okay. I guess it kind of asks, like, how you want your vampire, right? You have Dracula, who's this more refined, and then you have, like, the more monstrous bestial, like the 30 Days of Night vampires,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the 30 Days of Night vampires are scary because they're bestial, they're animalistic. They'll literally like, rip you apart, right? Dracula doesn't really rip you apart. So his kills, if you're going into a horror and expecting kills and things, it might not be what you're want because it's more seduction or like just bites. It might not be your cup of tea of what people's idea of horror is now. Same thing with like sometimes with slashers is if it's just someone with a knife killing people, it can be like, okay, you have to find the angles of building the tension and the mystery. And that goes back why I like
the directing and the writing.
Right. And that's why I like Scream so much is because it's got that mystery angle, which is another podcast for another day.
Well, Scream. Well,
Um,
it's gonna be a Scream, baby. So that leads into the next question, the next hard question: are vampire films and TV, vampire properties, if you will, are they too focused on sex?
yes.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
answer is yes. Moving on.
the argument could be that everything is. I mean, we live in a society that it focuses
Joker now?
heavily on it. Yeah, I totally could be if we want to.
You know,
No,
you had a few.
Never mind. It's a joke. It's a
Oh,
meme
sorry.
online where the Joker says, "We live in a society." Zack Snyder played on the joke. But anyway, moving on.
I would say I use that phrase a lot, actually. So
I was gonna say, like, you know, a few years ago we had two versions of a TV show, the American version and the BBC version, that dealt with anger management, sex addiction, and what's the term when you can't leave your home, like you're afraid to go outside.
Working from home.
Like, but the term like when you're afraid to like leave your house and you're shut in, basically.
I mean, there's hoarders, there's hermits, there. I don't know.
It's not. It must say it's not agoraphobic.
Phobia to go outside.
Yeah.
What about Bob?
Okay.
What about Bob phobia?
So that show approached these three types as sex addict, vampire, anger management, werewolf, agoraphobic, ghost, and that was being human. So they use those tropes to tell a story using these characters, which was, you know, very well done. But for the most part, you know, vampires being, there is a sexual undertone because it's the desire. It's, you know, you have the blood, the life. There is, but I've always joked with Junia about like vampires having sex because vampires are supposed to be dead and more of a like the living dead, and they have to ingest blood to survive, but they're not really supposed to have a circulatory system.
Right.
So like when you have things where vampires cut themselves and they bleed out, it really shouldn't work like that. That, with that being said, we'll get anatomically correct. A vampire shouldn't be able to have an erection.
I mean, I think that the blood would be present if they cut themselves, but I don't think that the blood would be flowing. So it would maybe just be stagnant.
So
of course, we don't know the biology necessarily of how it's processed,
and that comes down to like your individual lore. And I think, you know, that because you add those romance elements in stories, and I mean, even in Dracula, Lucy is thirsty as can be.
Right.
Yeah, she is.
There is a
James
prevalent
Cole's first wife
for, you know, sexuality and sex from the start of vampirism, like the lore period.
And you're forgetting too that there are storylines and stuff that are out there where vampires are not undead, which is like a completely like they're their own species.
Yeah. And I mean that's what I'm saying. That's where you get into the lore. There's so much of it because vampires are a character that's easily used that you can change things. But if we're looking at Dracula being like kind of the start, the most famous vampire, where then you can look at that as like everything kind of started breaking from there.
Sure.
But it goes back to what your lore in vampires are. Are they the supernatural or more biological, which I think can work for vampires, but not work for other things, and we'll get there.
So we all agree that Twilight ruined vampires and werewolves.
For a generation, I'd say But we were talking a little bit. It's like I've never read the books. I don't plan to read the books.
I've read all of them.
But there's elements in the
That
story.
you did.
I did.
Hashtag sexist comment.
There's elements in the stories that's interesting because, like we said, like to kill the vampire in their universe, you have to rip them apart and burn them, which is pretty hardcore.
Yeah,
When
they
you-
treat them as almost as if they are like otherworldly in some ways, in the sense of like, yeah, you can't kill them by normal.
I think if you took
Sure.
those stories, there's grounds in there, and you get the right director, you can make them dark and still make them more fearful and not joking that, because let's
There are
face
parts of the storyline that are very, very intense. Yes.
the first movie was made cheap. They got just a workshop director, like not really a visionary director. And anytime you set a series with your first director, is going to set your tone and your template because they do all your initial casting and designing. And Lionsgate knew they would make money off of it, and they did it cheap.
Can I just throw this in there? Just like as somebody who has actually read the Twilight books and stuff. If you've ever watched it, Brian, I don't know if you have, but the first movie, there is a
You talking about
scene.
Twilight?
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen all the Twilight movies.
Okay. In the first movie, there's the scene where you have we'll call him the evil vampire of the film, James. He murders a guy in a fishing boat. And that's how they find out, there's, this wild animal on the loose that's killing people and stuff. But in the book, when you're actually reading the legit story, it's quite creepy. It's quite creepy in comparison to what you see. So to be fair, I think what you guys have seen on screen is a lot more watered down.
That's what I just said.
I'm backing it.
So
Supporting it.
So what we're all agreeing on is Twilight, directed by James Wan.
Could be really interesting. And then the last scene and everything
Yeah,
that's
that'd be good.
supposed to be in the ballet studio or whatever, it's pretty creepy too in the book. Things can be pretty dark in that story. So just throwing that out there.
Dark like the lights in Bella and Edward's bedroom.
Right. Their casting was completely wrong. We'll start there. So
How dare you cast Batman as a horrible vampire before he's even Batman?
He was a much better Batman.
He was an awesome Batman.
Yeah, Tyler loves that Batman. Loves him.
I do too.
Tyler said that was his favorite Gotham. And hey, it's what you love. So let's get to the main event. Junia, did
Yeah.
Nosferatu fail you as a film?
That's such an epic
I already gave my review of my
question.
Counter Like podcast, so I need you guys' opinions.
Okay. Fair. So I really enjoyed the first part of the film. If we want to call it or put it into acts, first act was probably my favorite, especially, you would consider it just kind of.
That's what I said.
Yeah. You'd consider the castle part where, he shows up and, starts to introduce himself to, we start getting introduced, to the character more, that's the first act. So that whole sequence, before we actually see Nosferatu, I really love the whole situation and the scenes and the setups, and there's a lot of creepy dark elements, and I really wish they would have just taken that thread and carried it throughout the film. So if I was looking at just like that act 1 and I was judging the rest of the film, I'd be, or judging it separate from the film, I'd be like, nope, did not fail me. But once we went from act 1 and we kept going, it just went downhill for me. And it was the whole factor of the romance element should never have touched that movie, at least between Nosferatu and the young woman. But we should have kept that whole aspect of him being in the shadows. That should have been throughout the whole movie. We should never have had a straight
Did you
shot
listen to my
of him.
podcast?
No, I didn't.
I will say I haven't listened to it.
You did listen to my podcast.
I haven't listened to it yet because I didn't want, because we have not talked about it. Like we've really
We
tried
haven't.
We have not.
not to. So I haven't listened to Bryan's podcast because I didn't want to influence any of
Your
my
opinions
thoughts.
and stuff. I was kind of keeping back on a lot of my opinions for that.
I do
too,
influence very well. Yeah.
But I really, really enjoyed the shadows. My favorite aspect of the entire film was just the factor of his shadow walking through the stairs before you actually saw his body coming up through the stairs. But he should have always stayed in the shadow. There should have been no mustache. Did not make any sense to me whatsoever.
Well, he was Dr. You saw Sonic 3. Dr. Robotnik's great ancestor, Count Orlok. You know,
I mean, it makes sense,
In the flesh.
But that to me just kind of made it more goofy,
Mm.
actually. And I lost when we saw him in that first, shot of this is what he looks like. It took me from being unnerved to feeling like I want to laugh. And other than that, though, I think Bill Skarsgård did an amazing job with the actual characterization of Nosferatu. I would have loved to have been able to see it as like the first act energy the whole time.
you literally quoted my entire podcast. Like 100%. I'm with you. I think I even went a step further and said, if we would have never saw Nosferatu or Orlok through the whole film, and all we got was him blurred in the background, the shadow, and the voice. Like, I cannot replicate that voice, but I thought that voice was fantastic.
Yes.
And it freaked me out.
Yes.
There was a factor where I was like on the edge of my seat. And a couple times my mom looked over at me and she's like, "Hey, you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm totally great." A little creeped out, but like I'm great,
Like the
Yes.
June,
Exactly.
I need to sign these documents.
Uh-huh.
like
Yep. That's beyond somebody being ill. Like,
Yeah.
I
you-
couldn't even do
you-
the voice. I had to mute my mic just to cough. And
it was so good.
it was so good.
Yeah.
Oh,
I wanted more of that.
All right. My turn.
absolutely.
All right.
It
are you
wasn't
ready?
Johnny Depp in this movie.
You might want to set a timer on him, though.
No,
You got 10
I'll-
minutes, Tyler.
No, I will say I agree with
And go.
I wanted to go in and be freaked out and back to being scared of this. And I agree with everything. Like I looked at keeping him in the shadows, much like the shark from Jaws, where we're just being teased and we're there. And I was hoping for a slow reveal. I did watch the Doug Jones version. Did you get to watch it, Bryan?
I did not.
Okay.
Yet.
It's not worth
sorry.
watching. But just seeing the few scenes
That might be part of why I didn't watch it.
I love Dr. Jones.
well, it's I'll show you and tell you about it later, Jew, about what it is.
Sure.
But he's great. The scenes with Doug are awesome.
He's no Klaus Kinski.
Oh, he's better than Klaus. I don't like the Klaus Kinski version.
You don't like the Klaus version?
No, I don't.
Shut your hole. Well, he's no Max Shrek. There you go.
There you go. But I told the thing was the mustache and then the little bit of hair on him made him look goofy, almost like Gollum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't like when monsters are like balding and just a little bit of hair. And,
no, because
maybe they're
there's
hunters in the
monster.
woods, or
It depends on the monster.
like there's a certain when you say there, and we won't break it completely down, but there is a certain elements that's Nosferatu and then Dracula. One
you
thing
can
that's
find that in my Count Orlok podcast, ladies
and that's
and
why I
gentlemen.
won't go into it. But one big thing was Nosferatu doesn't have brides. Dracula,
They don't have Bryan.
they don't have brides.
Bryans.
I like
Yes,
Bryan.
Bryans.
better.
Yeah, the 3 Bryans that come to you at
Oh
night.
my god.
Oh my gosh, now that's a horror film. What would they look like?
But think Orlok is
Would they
more
all look like me?
monstrous.
Would one
Wow,
have bigger
Dracula's-
tits? Smaller tits?
Wow, Dracula's more suave, and there's differences in there. So I wanted to be more terrified. I thought there was neat elements like the fact that he bit and drank blood from the heart directly.
Yes.
The fact that he slept in his coffin naked was interesting. Because even
You don't
his
sleep
servant,
naked, Tyler?
not in a coffin of dirt.
Psh. I mean, I've been to your house many times, but like, I don't really go in your bedroom.
See, there you go.
Maybe there's a coffin in there.
But when we see Orlok, the first, like the shots, his costuming is so big, like the jacket and stuff that he wears.
Yeah.
It hides Bill, so that even when we do see him in the makeup and stuff, there's a sheen to his skin that almost looks like it's a CG creation compared to him in makeup. And even later on in the film, and then we don't really get him doing anything.
Right.
He just
Except
keeps
Johnny Depp's daughter.
Yeah, he keeps harassing her, and there's like 3-4 kills, attacks. Like there's nothing with the rats to really like start to instill fear of him coming, almost like you've invited the devil into the town.
Right.
There's neat elements in it, but I wondered if you feel that Orlok is on the streets and like just something about him walking the streets. But no, we never see him. And once again, this movie tries to make the Bram Stoker's version of the Nosferatu story, where there's this weird love affair, love romance. Orlok wants love, and dear God, being an actor that actually has to pretend like you're in love with Lily Rose Depp, that's skill. Because gosh, she was annoying. I told Junia at one point, just put Johnny in there and I'll buy it more.
That's what I've been saying this whole podcast. The whole
But-
podcast. Put Johnny in it.
But she was just, even her one scene where she's supposed to be like, I don't even know, like not even like possessed, but like does like the eye roll back and she's on her knees and then she's like, show him our love. But I never really felt connected between the two characters in their earlier scene before Thomas Lee. Is it not? What is it? Thomas?
Thomas. Yep.
Hutter. It's Hutter.
Thomas. Yep.
Before he leaves. And I don't know, when it's ends and it's over, you know, I feel like you have the professor character who's like, we know it has to be you. And the only way to stop him is for him to lose track of time, basically feeding on it felt like it fizzled, like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like, I didn't need some third act huge action scene, but I just never felt like Orlok. Yeah, I never felt like Orlok was dangerous because he didn't do anything but harass the one girl. And then even when he killed like the other, I felt more sorry for Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, who he's the one getting punished by his family being murdered
That's what
by
I
Orlok, than Hutter.
because he was he was like the Arthur Holmwood character of it, and I said in the Orlok episode that I was more interested in his character. I'm
Right.
more like his acting chops were better. I felt sorry for him. I was emotionally attached to him. Like him losing kind of everything with it, like it meant more. Like I didn't buy like Nicholas Hoult is a great actor.
Yes.
And he's going to continue to be a great actor. But in this, I couldn't buy his relationship. And it's more so her fault.
Yes.
Like she sucked. She was trash.
Yes.
And like there's differences between Nosferatu and Dracula, of course. Which I got in the Warlock podcast, but Dracula has to work in the shadows, and he has to manipulate things in the shadows, and he can walk among them, and he can be the gentleman and the manipulator, and the beast is inside. But Orlok is the shadows.
He's the beast. He is the shadows.
He is the shadows. He's the monster.
Yes.
So we take out any gentleman thing with the vampire, and that needs to be Orlok. And in my opinion, they just blew it. They blew it. Like if they would have never showed Orlok and they would have cut out this love story, and and just keep the manipulation, like him possessing people from afar. That's kind of okay, because you're showing that influence of Orlok and what he can do. But one element that they took out of here that I brought up in the podcast episode on Orlok, which was a pretty good podcast, everybody check it out. But is when Hutter goes to the castle and he stays at an inn in the original Nosferatu film, he finds a book. And it's like the Book of Belial, if you will. I think it was called the Book of Belial or Book of Vampires or something. And it tells him all about vampires and what he needs to be afraid of, and how to defeat the vampire they get from the book. And he takes that book with him. He finds it in this like little hole. I personally would have wrote something in here of like, who wrote this book? And where did this come from? And like, how was so there's two different theories of how Orlok was created. I mean, well, maybe there isn't, and I just thought there was. But Orlok was basically a sorcerer, a black sorcerer. And the character Orlok was created by occultists in Germany. The film that started the studio and everything. So the black magic and sorcery is a staple of the Orlok Nosferatu character. So, and him being a dark magician and being a servant of Belial turned him into the vampire creature. And that's that's part of his origin. So we need more of this animalistic thing, more of this demon, this
it helps,
and the rodentness and the animal.
It really had the opportunity to really help with what you're saying of separating Nosferatu from Dracula more, to reinvent
huge separation.
What is a Nosferatu type vampire compared to Dracula, and I felt like it went backwards.
Maybe that's a Hollywood thing right now. They're kind of trying to create these connections. Reason why the movie was called Wolfman instead of Face of the Wolf, for example, is because, well, Wolfman makes you think of the Wolfman and makes you feel like, oh, it's going to be like this story. Same thing with Nosferatu. Like, people are used to Dracula. That's the characterization that they know best. So the closer you can get to that, while still being this different thing, it's going to sell it more.
That's a really good point, because like looking online on YouTube, a lot of people that have been talking about Nosferatu have been saying, like, the title of their episode of their talk is like, Nosferatu, the Dracula ripoff, like letting people know that was ripped off of Dracula, and it was. But I think that I think you have to push that difference.
Yes,
that this is a different count. Like,
but Hollywood
in the multiverse, this is a different universe,
Yeah.
Yes.
Dracula, whatever. Yeah. But I think you're right. I think
they're playing it safe. I'm sorry.
No. Like, just backing up what you say, Junia, like, I think you're right. I think that the Eggers looked at, Coppola's Dracula and was like, people know this. People watch this. Like, when I ask people nowadays, they're like, yeah, that's Dracula I know. So he took that and then just threw it on the Nosferatu and merged it.
I think that we're seeing kind of Hollywood just kind of watering things down in general and creating less originality more and more. So I think this is a part of that, personally.
Yeah. So on a scale of 1 to 13 gravestones,
I love it.
Tyler, what do you give Nosferatu?
Out of 13.
Now let's give it out of 10. I was just being funny because, greatly amusing. Ooh, it's creepy. Yeah.
I like the 13.
Yeah, I like the 13.
Let's give the 13. Gravestones.
8.5.
Now, are we
Mm.
saying that 13 is the
That's-
best
yeah.
and 1 would be
13 out of
fourth?
13 is the best.
Okay.
I
So we
think-
like more dead people in this. Okay.
Because my thing is, visually, I can stare at that movie, even though some of the shots annoyed me, where he kept having to put everything center frame. But I don't think I could rewatch it over and over because I think it just doesn't have the rewatchability because it's once we're past that first act, there's nothing thrilling to it anymore once I've seen it.
Yep.
I know that it's going to fizzle out with Lily Rose Depp just being annoying. So
One of the most detrimental things I think we can do sometimes is take the mystery out of movies like this. Because what ends up happening is it's like the whole thought process in horror movies that you see like possessions and stuff. And once you name the demon, you take its power away. Well, once you show too much,
Yeah.
you
said-
take its
you
power
said-
away.
You said the thing.
So anyhow, that being said, I would probably toss this at a 6 just because the storyline wasn't there. And that's out of 13, and I stand by that. And the storyline wasn't there. The acting wasn't there from one of your main protagonists. And yeah, but the visuals were great. And Bill was a great actor for that role, just not done right.
he should have gotten Bill. Here we go. Ready? Because it all comes back to my boy. Bill is to Nosferatu what Henry Cavill is to Superman,
Yes.
where they're
Accurate.
great, but they were not given the right material to do the part because he was so shortchanged. He was so hidden by a coat and in the dark that we didn't actually get to see his physicality and see him actually embody the character. Because when we do see the full body, it doesn't even look like it's a person. You could have almost got a stunt actor and just had Bill do the voice in ADR.
What about you, Bray Guy?
I can't remember what I graded it on my Orlock episode, but I think out of 13 I give it maybe a 6.5. And the reason I rank it that is because the first half is quite good.
Yes.
And Aaron Taylor Johnson really sells his characters, his Homewood character. And some of the visuals are pretty good, and some of the possession scenes are pretty decent. But I don't know, maybe a 6.3 even, like just a little bit above 6, but not quite, and definitely not 7. Because I don't think it's not going to be a movie. If it's a movie I'll probably watch again maybe once, and then every maybe 10 years or so, who knows? Like
Just to refresh your memory why you don't like it.
Yeah.
yeah, it just didn't. It could have been something really special.
Yeah.
It really, really could have. And
I was very excited.
Yeah, I think we were all excited. Like when Bill was cast, I was like, okay, all right. And then Edgar's doing it. I was like, okay.
That first trailer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I almost I think if you take Bill and just how he looks normally, and we just take Bill's natural face and natural look and natural build and have the skinniness of kind of Shrek had, and then we just give him like the long fingernails and do that makeup to make him more kind of rodent looking, that he would have looked even more terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I liked the maggots in his body, like making him look more corpse like and kind of dying. But he just looks so, I forget how I described him before, but like he had the long arms and just like he just looks like some creature out of like a video game. Like it was like Gollum on steroids with a Robotnik head.
Yeah.
Like but
Accurate.
it just didn't work. So I give it like a 6.5. And which goes into our final question of our vampire talk. How can we make vampires great again?
I'm gonna take
Vampires
this.
and Dracula. How can we make them great again?
All right, timer, Brian.
I've been thinking here. Okay, first of all, you had these characters that were meant to be horror that we've slowly added to and tried to do them as action stars too.
Okay.
Okay. Now I made a list here of just some of the Dracula or vampire-based properties of this decade. So I was thinking of more recent, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to go back 5 years, looking at 2020 to now. Okay. In no order, because I was just writing them down. We have the BBC Netflix Dracula of 2020. Salem's Lot came out this year. Nosferatu was this year. We had The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which was 2023. Renfield, which was 2023. The Invitation, which was 2022. And then even Abigail, which was 2024. And at one point, her dad was supposed to be Dracula, but they changed it and kind of just alluded to it. So
That's Dracula. We'll just say it's Dracula.
yeah, I mean, he was supposed to be, and that was the kind of the twist, another twist on that. So just those films for vampires or Dracula, in the last 5 years, we could look at what was done wrong, what was done right. Bryan and I were very pissed at the way they did Last Voyage of the Demeter. Like, it could have been something great.
That could have been great.
And it was not
Really
at all.
Great.
And then even Renfield could have been, because Nicolas Cage in that is really good, but they went for more over-the-top horror comedy.
Right.
And didn't do that much with Cage.
Oh, I forgot about that movie.
Because some of his scenes are really good. Like when he's sitting there in Renfield's apartment and he's like reconvincing Renfield to basically be his servant and messing with his mind.
And we see that narcissism really go out.
And I think back to Brian's question, I think you got to start putting more mystery back in, keeping them in the shadows, making them fearful, something elemental. Looking at some of the things like vampires, because there's scenes that are really creepy in that TNT Salem's Lot. I've always thought that you can do vampires scary and creepy and freaky again. There were some scenes in Penny Dreadful of the vampires that were creepy till we got Dracula, and he sucked. So you can make them scary and creepy again. I think you have to incorporate the psychology. And then to go back to make Dracula again, I've pitched this before on my requel, on my YouTube channel for requel. And I think you got to go back to the source material and you put Dracula in the background. You have him active when Harker's there. And then you slowly put him more in the background and see how he affects the other characters. You make him unnerving. I think you make him a little bit the way Penny Dreadful did Dorian Gray, where there's this allure to him.
Right. He did have a Dracula kind of air about him.
Where it makes you uncomfortable even as a heterosexual male, that there's an allure about this man and you don't know how to feel. So that there's idea that Dracula is the devil walking on earth.
Right.
And I think it works if you have different layers of vampire, like just the teeth. And then he gets later on, at times he'll turn a little bit more monstrous, that he can control his appearance a little bit more. And then like he maybe has a full on more bat monster look. It also comes down, I think, sometimes about if they do it CG or makeup can make it kind of cheesy. Van Helsing was a action film with these characters, and that took them out of the horror realm. So I think Dracula can be scary. Because like I said, the Klaus BBC version, he literally creeped me out, and there was like evil. Dracula needs to be evil. The personification of evil. He kills without thinking. He's anti-religion, all religions. I think that would be fun to incorporate in the story of how he denounces God in any shape or form, not just the Christianized version. I think would hit really hard. So I think Dracula can still be very, very scary. It is a character. I mean, I also wrote in my notes that we had in 2022 we had Hotel Transylvania 4.
That's funny.
Right.
I mean, yeah. Would you rephrase the question for me?
Is what he stated was, can we make vampires or can we make Dracula great again?
Yeah. Yeah. So I fully 110% agree that we can. Like I told you earlier, I think it's just about teaching the public. I think it's about, revamping the stories that we know, revamping the ideas that we think that we know of, vampires and Dracula, and, really digging more into. Okay, let me put it like this. Okay. One of my biggest lessons in life recently has been to simplify, and the power, like understanding the power in simplification in life. All right. If there's power in simplification in life in general, there's going to be power in simplification in a story.
Mm-hmm.
So when we add on the multiple layers of a character, and yes, that can be interesting. Layers in a character are interesting. It adds the mystery. It can, create a persona like, Dracula's suave persona on top of, the monster that's within. But I think if we get back to our roots, if we really strip it back to the book itself and make it more about the actual, I want to take it beyond horror. I want to say like the actual terror of the situation, because it is that. It doesn't have to work to be that. It is that already. So it's really just doing that justice and letting that be seen. And I think, honestly, I'll go back to this and I'll say that Act 1 of Nosferatu gave me a lot of hope because it felt like that. It had those elements where I was like sitting there feeling the terror, kind of like we did with Klaus. Is that what his name is?
Yeah.
Right. Remind me what the name of the, I can't remember the name of the
It was just
TV
Dracula.
show.
It was just Dracula.
It was just Dracula.
It was on the BBC / Netflix.
Yeah. So, I mean, with that situation, there was definitely a lot of terror that was built up, a lot of tension and real genuine fear of that character. And there almost has to be an air of hopelessness that's involved here too.
Yeah.
If we don't have the hopelessness, then we don't have the fear. We don't.
Agreed.
We have to have that as far as selling the story to the audience. So absolutely, the roots are there. And when we have strong, good foundation, we can always get back. We can always make it better.
Like you said, with less is more. As much as I am a person who loves backstory, give me less. Dracula just is. You can play around with the idea that people have theories of where he comes from, but don't make it definitive. Just Dracula is evil incarnate. And
like we've had this talk so many times about like, how they keep trying to push us a Joker origin, like and like less is more. The more you don't know, the less you humanize a villain, and the more you don't know, it gets so much better. Like, because you're like, what is he? And you wonder and you have that mystery, and that's what's going to do it. And to make vampires and Dracula great again, give me less like detail, give me less love, more evil, and let's kick some ass. God damn it, let's kick some ass. So thank you everybody for joining us for this part 1 of this talk. We're going to make it a 2-parter because we went over an hour and a half here. As I predicted we kind of would, because we love talking about this stuff. So this will be part 1 of our this Hollywood Order Monsters Off Wish talk, the Vampire Edition, and just some recommended viewing and reading about some things we talked about for you guys. We're recommending Blade. Definitely watch Blade. Watch Blade 2. You can skip probably Blade 3 unless you're a completionist, but I would just skip it. 1931's Dracula with Bela Lugosi. The Lost Boys. Interview with the Vampire with Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. Queen of the Damned with Leah. The Dracula series on Netflix. I'd like to throw in Dusk Till Dawn on there as well.
I know we didn't even
talk about that.
Did you ever watch the series?
I have not.
Okay. I watched the first season. That's all I'll say. Keep going.
Is it good?
Yes, it was. The first season was good.
Dusk Till Dawn, the series, everybody. Once Bitten with Jim Carrey. Happy birthday, Jim. I would like to throw in a vampire movie I watched a lot as a kid because of my awesome Aunt Carol. My Best Friend is a Vampire. It's an 80s movie. It's very cheesy.
We didn't even touch on Fright Night.
I am right now. And and I want to throw in there Fright Night, the original and the new one.
I like the remake.
What about Let Me In?
The remake is
Or
great.
Let the Right One In?
We're talking about Fright Night. Like, I watched the original this year. I didn't really like the original. Like, I liked the vampire guy, but I didn't like the other side. I love the remake because I'm a Anton Yelchin fan. Rest in peace, Anton. And I love what's his face in the movie. Why am I drawing a blank all of a sudden? Doctor Who.
David Tennant.
Yes, David Tennant. Like, I love him as Peter Vincent in that movie.
I loved him, period.
So I highly recommend the Fright Night remake just because I enjoy those two.
Junia, recommended viewing, reading of vampire stuff. And go.
Oh my gosh.
Just anything. Like,
I knew you were going to say that because like mine are all over the place.
Well,
though.
good.
Give me two.
Yeah. He named a bunch and I just threw in a couple.
Okay. So recommended. Of course, Queen of the Damned, because that's a favorite.
Mentioned that.
Yes, I did. My brain is not braining. So I've read an entire vampire series, but it's heavy on romance and stuff, and I don't know if that's even something that anybody would be interested in.
But I will say
we need more. We need more female listeners. So keep going, please.
No, but I will say I've listened to some with her on audiobook. The lore of the series is sweet. And that is always something like if
I
you
love
can
lore.
introduce me in the lore and make it something unique, I'm hooked on it from that point of view. So
I mean, there's
definitely
like
reference
20,
it, Juju.
30 books. And the series continues to grow. It's actually building its own TV show right now. So anyway, it's called the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. It starts with the first story is called Dark Lover. And you can tell that the stories are kind of like really geared toward more of the dark romance. But like I said, there's a lot of action. There's a lot of lore, a lot of world building. It's very intense. And the characters are just the kind of characters you, and pun intended, you want to sink your teeth into. And, not necessarily in the physical sense. But anyway, it's a great
No
storyline.
judgment. You're not my wife.
It's a great storyline. And then as far as a movie goes, I also love Dracula Untold. I know that it's not necessarily a Dracula movie, but I love some of the lore that's there with Vlad the Impaler.
That's another one I'm going to let Solomon watch. It's PG-13.
Dracula 2000 is interesting just from the Judas perspective.
Because the twist.
I love that.
We didn't talk about that, so I like that. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And then I mentioned, what is it called? Let Me In. Is that what the name? Let the Right One In.
I like the remake, but the American.
Is that the one with the children, where the one child's a vampire?
Yeah.
Creepy.
Yeah, I don't mean to watch
I'll
that.
get out.
It's even more creepy when you know the truth about the Swedish version, and I won't say it right now, but I prefer the American version just because I think it works better.
Yep. So I have all kinds of stories that I could share and stuff, but those are the main ones that I think I would throw out there.
I love it. Well, everybody, that's our vampire talk. So we're going to split this into two parts. Our second part will come in a couple of days where we talk about werewolves and the Wolfman and our review there. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to know more about horror history and opinions on vampires and classic monsters and a whole bunch of stuff, hit the follow button on your podcast player. Search for us on YouTube and subscribe on there. I'm still on Facebook and Instagram. I don't know how much longer because the way the Mark Zuckerberg kind of wants to control information. We'll see. TikTok is no more as of this recording. It's going away. So it might not be on there anymore. X, who knows with Elon Musk, the way he does things. But as of this moment, I'm on all those things. So you can find us on there. So I hope this podcast thrilled you. I hope it shocked you. And if nothing else, I hope it left you gravely amused.